start with a pledge, please. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry.
That's okay.
President Warner.
Here.
Secretary Treasurer Horowitz.
Here.
Trustee Pell.
Present.
Trustee Stafford.
Here.
Trustee Welker.
Here.
Sir, we have a quorum present this evening.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for everybody from the public for attending. It's a special meeting for the trustees. It's a community information forum, Tuesday, December 18th, 2018 at 6 p.m. Please be advised that the Board of Trustees will be hosting a community informational forum at the David W. Crowan Community Center, 655 Flanders Road, Flanders, New York, on Tuesday, December 18th from 2018 from 6 to 9 p.m. to allow the interested parties to hear and discuss living shorelines, permeable reactive barriers, fish ladders, LYs, and other issues affecting Wildwood Lake. So that's what we're going to be discussing tonight. And after that's done, we're going to have a public session. Anybody that wants to ask the trustees questions that are pertinent to this area, you're more than welcome. So the first order of business is Community Oyster Garden discussion with Kim Tetral, Community Aquaculture Specialist, Cornell Corporate Extension. Hi, Kim. How you doing?
Hey there. We have a program down at on Dune Road at Tiana at the Pavilion for community oyster gardening, and boy, I think we're going into our 8th year.
Yes.
I came up to the trustee office, and we were talking about thises and that's and various things. And the trustee said it would be great if we could have a community garden in Southampton. And they handed to me a piece of Eden. I'm sure a lot of you have been to Tiana, and I only knew the Pavilion. And across the street is where they have the swim classes and these nice docks and all these things. And boy, I tell you, when I went down there and I looked at it, I couldn't believe what a perfect spot it was for a community garden. And of course, I'm a geek with tunnel vision. I think everything is great as long as it's oysters and community. But we started the program, and in its first year it had, I think, 15 members, and they came in and they grew. And now, last year we ran 80 lines over there. The pictures, if they were here, would show you this huge array. It's very festive looking because there are these colored swim noodles on the side of these floating oyster cages, which make it look really festive. However, we've now gone to the black commercial floats because they're more environmentally friendly. So we'll have to probably paint them to make them look festive, or they'll look very kind of paramilitary, but very orderly. The membership has been strong, and the membership has been very happy to be growing there. Everyone pitches in to do a noble job of keeping things orderly. Everyone gets 1,000 oysters to grow. We have one of the few programs in the country. It might actually be the only. I did a little research for a book that just came out from Denmark looking at community gardening. And there's a lot of oyster gardening in the United States, a lot in the Chesapeake. But there's one kind of difference. You don't get to keep any of the oysters that you grow. And I understand that. I just have found over time, I've been running the SPAT program at Cornell Cooperative Extension for 19 years. SPAT is the Suffolk Project in Aquaculture Training. The SPAT at Tiana is the Southampton Project in Aquaculture Training. We've got our own. What happened with me in my experience with community growing oysters is if we used to give everyone 2,000 oysters and they were supposed to give 50% back so that we would plant them. And what I found is that that was too many oysters to grow. There is mortality, there's loss, there's these things. So at the end of this run, people would be trying to give back 50% of what they grew, and it just didn't seem right. And what I decided was if you grow your own 1,000 oysters and you take good care of them, they're all going to spawn. So you're creating a spawner sanctuary to fuel the rest of the bay. So that, because they're protected all the time, there's a good chance of when this mass of oysters that are, for instance, at Tiana, if there were 50,000 oysters growing there, 50 members, 1,000 oysters, 50,000, plus people are multi-cropping. I've got some people that have been in the program all 8 years. Just keep coming and coming and coming. There were pictures of Ira. I call him the mayor of Tiana because he's there like all the time watching over it. That's a spawner sanctuary. So that's a good bank of adult oysters, and oysters can spawn after they've overwintered a year. More so in subsequent years. As far as water quality goes, I'd love anybody to come to any shellfish hatchery. Spat has 2 shellfish hatcheries. Cornell just building its next 3rd hatchery. We have 5 hatcheries at the Marine Center now. If you come there and you look under the microscope at a 1-day-old larvae, you see how much algae it's eating. It eats 1,400 cells a day as a 1-day-old larvae. As a 14-day-old larvae, it eats 80,000 cells a day. You can't even see this larvae, and it's going like a vacuum cleaner. So imagine what an adult oyster is doing with filtration. There's a lot of different figures on how much water an oyster can filter in the course of a day, and it goes all over the place. But the statistic I like is that in the day of a lot of oysters in Manhattan, which there were in 1900, the oysters would filter all of the water in Manhattan every 10 days. All of it. All of the water would pass through an oyster. So they're prolific filters. We would like to get them to be, once again, prolific filterers for our bays. They're fun to grow. They're environmentally friendly. You can eat them. You can plant them. You can't sell them. We're non-commercial. We don't want to compete with any commercial operations. We do offer, the next thing that the trustees and town board let us have was the old police annex there, which we've retrofitted into a marine education facility. And it's growing. That area is really growing, and I don't know what the feedback has been for the trustees. I know what the feedback's been with me. I shouldn't actually be giving this talk for letting people know about it because it's kind of the best kept secret, and it's not really a secret, but it's very well attended. I don't mind. I don't know what the limit's going to be on it. We haven't really reached it yet. We're coming pretty close. I never spat altogether has 250 families growing oysters, which is a lot of fun. I can't imagine what it would be like if it was 500. I'd have to clone I've tried cloning myself twice, and the thing keeps dying in a petri dish. So one day we'll have success there too, and maybe I'll have Ed take over for me. He looks like he. But I welcome anybody to come and take a peek at it, and join in if you'd like. If you want to just come by and learn things, that's good too. We're offering lectures there. We're starting to expand on the whole aquaculture training. It's good to have community involved in aquaculture, in natural resources. They're critical for our community, and we're a roots people. I mean, we live on the water. It's all around us. The kids love it. I kind of wish the pictures had come up, because you'd see little kids and their grandmothers growing oysters together. And it's a very bonding thing. It's been a very positive thing. For me, it's been just incredible to see. You know, I don't really care about science anymore. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm a sociology guy. I look at people, and I love characters. And there are a lot of characters in our town. There's a lot of great people in our town. And I don't know what it is about oysters, but it brings community together in a remarkably positive way. I've had one curmudgeon in 19 years, and we got rid of him in about 4 weeks. And that was it. Everybody else is amazing. And these guys are amazing. And I will profusely thank you for talking me into the annex, because it's been a home run, and I hope that you're getting as much out of it as I am. So if there's any quick questions, I guess we got a question or two, or if anyone wants to know more, you can always find us on the websites. The program is through the Parks Department, Southampton Parks. You can sign up with Southampton Parks. It's usually in their summer brochure. If you're interested in any kind of things, aquaculture, you can look up either SPAT Cornell or Cornell Cooperative Extension Marine Program, and there's a great website there, and it should answer any questions you have. If you call Darcy, she could give you my email, and then you can bug me for eternity.
Kim, can you just touch on the Merchants project that you did with the Merchants Bay project up there, and the solar upweller that we
Sure.
worked on?
Well, part of
worked on?
what we do at Cornell is we do partner with other groups. And Merchants Bay project is a group that we partner with that are really concentrated on Merchants Bay and that area. And so the Merchants Bay project, we've been working with them for about 6 years, maybe more. And they have 5 floating upwellers, and one of them is a solar floating upweller, which took a little while to get iron out all the details, but it's actually a really beautiful unit. It's complete. It's going to be running at the Yacht Squadron, West Hampton Beach. It's on a trailer, which makes it really kind of unique that you could drive this trailer up, park it there next to the floating upweller unit. And it has a motor that drops right down onto the unit. If you had power, you could run the other motor that swaps right on. It will run without power, though. It's a pretty large solar array. It'll run a small house. It's only got to run one pump, but it's got to run one pump 24/7. So it can't go, when the sun is down, the battery banks have to keep it running. There is a buffer. We've come up with some pretty interesting things. We're putting it on a timer to let it just shut down for about 4 hours a day. And part of the fun I have with this whole thing is if we get students involved in doing some primary research, I'd love to know when oysters don't feed. Do they feed 24/7? I doubt it. Do they feed on an up tide, a down tide, day, at night? Could you turn this machine on and off to hit when they're really wanting to pump? These are things that we can look at with the kids, not me. I'm done with science. Grants, all that stuff. You have to support all the paperwork. Oh, dreadful. But Mauritius Bay grew 500,000 oysters last year. They did a very good job, excellent job. And they're being planted in sanctuary sites. The thought of what the future of a lot of places, including Cornell, we got quite a large grant from the governor to develop 5 pretty extensive sanctuary sites. There have to be some areas where there are big banks of adult shellfish that can spawn and fuel the bay. We found from a project that we started in 2004 with scallops, that was a state grant because we had lost our scallops to brown tide. There was this thought that there had to be a big enough adult assemblage to actually have enough spawn to go into the bay to have it take hold. And it was documented, and I think the real documentation is opening day. You know, even in a bad year, this year was not as good as last year, but there were scallops coming in. And you know, there was a study in 1994 or 5 of Peconic Bay. I think Ron was in on that study. And they found 4 live scallops in the entire system. That will not bring scallops back. So we put $500,000 there every year. And we have sets of scallops. Well, that's going to hold for clams. It's going to hold for oysters. The baymen need infusion of good sets, and it's a roller coaster. We have to play the roller coaster of what nature offers us. Sometimes we're going to get great years of sets, and some years we might not get any sets. And so we have to be constantly giving an infusion into that system to make sure that it's healthy. And then, you know, there'll be plenty to harvest. Aquaculture is different than wild harvest. I think I like the SPAT program because it takes the pressure off of the wild harvest. You're a farmer, you're growing some, you know, there's some new oyster growers coming on board. Very entrepreneurial. We'll see where that goes. The good news about shellfish and aquaculture is it's environmentally friendly. There's something that we have to keep reminding the community and other folks, because aquaculture has a strange reputation. Trout and salmon grown in fish pens have a cost to them environmentally. Shellfish, you've got to grow them in natural water. It's got to be good water. If you're growing them here, hallelujah, because we have good water, okay? If you're in Bayonne, anyone from Bayonne? I shouldn't ever bring up Bayonne without checking. If you're in Bayonne, you're not probably eating the oysters. If you're part of the Billion Oyster Project, that's not for eating oysters. But here, we've got glorious water, and the shellfish improves it. It doesn't degrade it, and that's a home run for us.
I was approached by a couple of people from the community in Flanders over the last couple of years, and they asked me what was the feasibility of starting an oyster garden in this local area, possibly with some of the properties that the town has accepted by the Sandy Rising funds.
Well, basically the deal is this. If you are a waterfront homeowner and your water is certified, meaning that it's either seasonal, and there are closure maps, the seasonal would look blue in color, or no color, meaning that it's never closed, then you can grow oysters there. If it's red, it's uncertified. If you're around a marina, most of the marinas are uncertified. There are a lot of creeks that are uncertified. These are usually from high fecal coliform counts, especially in the summertime or warmer weathers. Then you can't grow there. If you were a commercial operation and you were running a nursery, you could, but you'd have to deal with the permitting from DEC on that. As far as a community garden, that's a different story, because there have to be all these magic elements. One being accessibility, safety. There is a liability issue. And it's doable. we can look at any site and we can determine it. The good news is if it first has to go by the trustees and town board of Southampton, we're very aligned in our thinking. I mean, I can't say enough about how important that is to have an entity that is aligned with what you're thinking when you're thinking environmentally and community. Instead of it being, oh, well, we'd like to do that, but we'd have to get the trustees to, the trustees are asking us now to come on board to get more areas, and that's tremendous. And so that's a positive. And we can look at any site. I would say that the biggest issue is usually just accessibility. If it's safe and there's, not issues like it's going to be poached all the time or just going to get ripped up or it's unsafe for kids, because you have to really think of all ages being involved in a community garden. So as far as your own waterfront, we already have the mechanisms for doing that.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, and again, have a great holiday.
You too.
Thanks
You
for
too.
thinking of us.
Good job.
Next discussion that's on the agenda is permeable reactive barrier discussion. Ron Poulsen and Molly Griffin, Cornell Carpet Extension.
Again, thank you for allowing us to come in and talk about some of the efforts that have been going on now for actively in the town for the last 5 years or so. When Kim was talking, something occurred to me that he was talking about natural processes and how some of the best things we can do are to be, in sync with nature and using processes that are already in place. And the process that's behind reactive barriers is really a natural denitrification process that is occurring in nature naturally. And really what we're doing, similar in a way to what Kim was doing, is to enhance the environment to promote these processes in areas where they're suitable. So it's basically creating an environment that can take advantage of the excessive nitrogen that is in our waters, entering our waters through a variety of processes, whether it's septic systems, atmospheric deposition, legacy impacts from agriculture, fertilization, and can be set up in such a way to provide the environment, which needs a carbon source, which is what the wood chips are a key ingredient of a reactive barrier, and also a groundwater drive that can push it through, and then an environment that the oxygen is low or depleted in. And that's what the PRB essentially does. It creates the proper environment for a natural process to occur. And using nitrogen or nitrate as a fuel in a sense to remove the oxygen that life needs and release the nitrogen is nitrogen gas. That's 80% of our atmosphere that's inert. So it's a green technology also, and you're creating an environment that you're allowing a natural process to occur in. So it's not a highly technical. What's difficult about it is putting this in the right areas with the right conditions. It's not something that's going to work everywhere. It's something that we've learned through the years, and we continue to learn, that we can take advantage of certain features of our shorelines that have the right conditions, that have the need to remove nitrogen, that have impaired water bodies, that have low dissolved oxygen, and encourage this process to occur within those zones. So it's really, designing in such a way in various ways now that we're experimenting with to promote that and to get a beneficial effect, which is a reduction of nitrogen. One thing about a permeable reactive barrier is that it doesn't care what the source of nitrogen is. It removes nitrogen in our groundwater that entered through atmospheric, septic, fertilizers, legacy, maybe through animal waste in certain situations. So you're removing nitrogen. It doesn't discriminate, and it removes that nitrogen. And if it's set up near a shoreline, it's going to effectively remove that nitrogen from all those sources, and versus another technique that might only be able to remove, through the septic waste or such, or through reduced fertilization. So there is some advantage to that. I talked about areas that this would be beneficial in. The one thing we look at, and there's been a lot of modeling, a lot of effort being done by Suffolk County and the United States Geological Survey to talk about solute transport and where this nitrogen comes from and how long does it remain in the groundwater before it discharges. And a map like this shows, gives you an indication of how many years it would be. So the pink areas at the shoreline in 2 to 5 years, the water that enters through rainfall, through our septics, that gets into the groundwater will vent out. So those are areas where land uses inland can be very effective, because if you improve alternate septics, if you control fertilization, if you have good zoning, or you enhance the natural environment or wetlands in those areas, you're going to be able to make an impact a lot sooner. Unfortunately, we have water that will also be in the aquifer for 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the center of the island. Excuse me, let me go back. Some of this water can be in these areas here, can be in for hundreds of years. That groundwater will take before it'll vent at a shoreline, if ever. So we're really focused at these nearshore areas for the most immediate relief that we need in impaired water bodies. This, what's been called submarine groundwater discharge. You've all seen it at the shoreline. You probably felt it if you waded offshore in shallow water. You feel this cold water in the summer. That's groundwater. Groundwater is always about 50 or so degrees. Surface water might be 70 or 80. So you can sense it, and you can even see it at the shoreline. You'll see these little riverets coming out. There's a very strong face usually right after that. It's very effective. And even at lower high tide, it's pumping groundwater out. And if you go out further offshore, you get into more of a mixing zone, where the groundwater and the tidal water are mixing. You might have a lot of silts and sediments there that also do have nitrogen salts. So the techniques that we need to understand to design a PRB is to put it in the right area that has the right conditions. And these are just some of the techniques that are used. The obvious ones are, evaluating the groundwater. There's modeling efforts. There's a variety of different probes that are used to map out these offshore groundwater discharge areas and to determine, what is entering there. And is it a suitable area for a permeable reactive barrier? There's different techniques that we've been developing through Cornell and through Stony Brook. Through the years, through my 25 years, different probes, different seepage meters that are used to measure the discharge. So we have a lot of in-house ability, local ability. We've done this in other parts of the country too, so we're well versed, we're fortunate, and we can apply all that to these areas now. So what are we doing locally? Well, in this area, we have a project that was funded by the New York State DEC water quality grant that the town had received to install in the Flanders area, in and around maybe Iron Point Park, to put a trench system in near the shoreline that could go down 30 feet, be up to 300 feet long. And that can be basically, it's a wood chip aggregate mix that goes in that trench. The groundwater will passively go through. That can treat the nitrogen, the excessive nitrogen that's in the groundwater. So that's one active thing right in this area in Flanders that we're pursuing. We've done a lot of the site characterization. We're trying to finalize the site for that. There's another project in Hampton Bays that through the CPF money. We recently received a grant. I'm a part of the Hampton Hills Homeowners Association. We applied for a CPF grant to put a treatment behind bulkheads. And I think that's one of the things that could help, because there's bulkheads that are around, however you feel about it, they're going to be there a while. Can those bulkheads be adapted so that a treatment can be put behind them, that the groundwater that's building up behind them can be treated and vented through the bottom of the bulkhead without compromising the bulkhead? So we've been fortunate. We did a little pilot, and as the association was replacing it, they allowed me to put a test pilot in. And I'm fortunate today, I have a colleague, Nils Volkenberg from Stony Brook, who's been very active with us, and his student, Molly Graffam, to help us do the initial testing of that. And we have very encouraging results. And I'm going to let Nils talk about that and where we're going to continue to do that. We have the grant. We hope to get that in place and to evaluate that over the next several years. There's other areas potentially in Reeves Bay, and we have projects in East Hampton. But let me let Miles.
Thank you, Ron. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk. So I'm not Molly Graffin. Molly is a student in my lab. I'm assistant professor at Stony Brook. I work on various things, but part of my research is together with Ron on these permeable reactive barriers that are associated with bulkheads. And this is not to advocate for more bulkheads, but as you see, and I took this when I was paddling out further west, many of these bulkheads are pretty rotten and they will need to be replaced. And the idea is, could we use this opportunity to add permeable reactive barriers to those to give them a benefit? And so we have done now some studying on the test cell at Hampton Bays, which in principle this just gives you an idea how this test cell looks like. So just a portion of this bulkhead has a treatment cell which is filled with wood chips. There are lots of holes in this bulkhead so that the groundwater from behind the bulkhead can actually run through this bulkhead to the ocean. And we have several monitoring and sampling ports in there so that we can measure what's going on in these PRBs. There are only a few other studies that have investigated PRBs in these locations where they are potentially affected by seawater intrusion, and I will talk a little bit about it. The few studies that are out there indicate that these PRBs will have a longevity of about 30 years. So the wood chips that you put in, they are not degraded very fast. Instead, they remain there for a long time, providing conditions that allow for denitrification to occur. These are data that we have collected within this PRB test cell, and it's a lot of data. And you see that there are some dynamics that are very obvious. So the gray background here is the tidal cycle. So you can see with the tides, the water level within this bulkhead PRB is changing, because during high tide, seawater is pushing into the bulkhead, while during low tide, water is flowing out. Whenever water is flowing out of this bulkhead, you see a slight increase in oxygen, the blue line, and also an increase in salinity, because seawater is mixing into these systems. So our question now was, to what extent does this saltwater intrusion affect the nitrogen removal in those systems? And luckily, it does not affect it very much. So this is here nitrate concentration of the water that goes in. Down here is the nitrogen concentration that goes out, and you see that pretty much all the nitrogen is removed from the groundwater. So this is a very promising result. It's just a small test cell, but it shows you the potential of this system. So NOx that goes in was about 5 milligrams per liter. What goes out is pretty much 0. Some of the questions are related to, so from these measurements in the field, we then designed a long-term laboratory experiment where we investigated this in more detail, specifically how this nitrogen removal is affected or depends on how long the water stays within the system, and also to what extent it depends on the nitrogen loading. So in the field we saw like 5 milligrams per liter coming in, but how do these systems work when there's more or less nitrate in the water? We also wanted to test experimentally what are the effects of salinity, or are there some? And as a researcher, we are also interested in what could be potential problems, in this case mostly byproducts that we may not want, because microbes, and unfortunately this is cut off here, microbes within these systems and in the ground anywhere, they will ever use metabolites that are available to them. So in principle, even microbes will first use oxygen, because this is a favorable electron acceptor for organic matter mineralization. In these PRBs, we develop anoxic conditions, so then nitrate is the next molecule that they take to burn organic matter. The next one would be sulfate, and the ultimate one will be CO2. The latter two would produce products that we don't want, because H2S is stinky, even though it's common in marine sediments, and CH4 methane is a greenhouse gas. So we wanted to test if this is a potential problem. So we did an experiment over multiple weeks where we filled these pipes with matrix from the PRB test cell, so H material with a functional microbial community, and then we pump water through these pipes with peristaltic pumps. This is a more complicated setup, because one thing we did, you see a pinkish foil here, this allows us to look through the through this transparent pipe and look at the oxygen concentration within this pipe. And we could confirm that indeed anoxic condition established quite rapidly within those pipes. But then the most interesting results, I think, is how much nitrogen was removed within these pipes. So over the weeks, we changed the conditions in terms of the influent nitrate concentrations, and we measured the effluent. We changed the pumping rate so that the water would stay in those columns for 1 or 2 days. And overall, we find relatively consistent nitrogen removed in these columns. And that was irrespective of the incoming nitrogen concentration and the residence time within those systems. Meaning, if the water stays in there very short, the reduction in the nitrate concentration may not be that high, but a lot of water is treated. So these systems are kind of resilient in terms of how much nitrogen comes in and how long does the water stay in there, which is good for a bulkhead PRB, because as you saw, it's very dynamic. Water moves forward and back at different velocities. But we came up with these numbers, like this is the mean of 12 columns. So you see that these values, irrespective of what the conditions were relatively constant, between 3 and 4.6 milligrams of nitrogen per day per column. We did not see much of these undesired products. We measured a little bit of sulfate in these columns that received that had higher salinities, because in this experiment we played a little bit with salinities that we added to these cores, but sulfite was really not a big problem. Methane we actually measured only in the columns that received fresh water, and the reason for that is if these systems run out of nitrate because they are performing so well, microbes will take the next available electron acceptor. And sulfate is really abundant in seawater, not so much in groundwater. So to some extent, this intrusion of seawater is actually beneficial for these systems, because the likelihood that methane will produce, which would be the next process to occur, is very low. Just to give you an idea what is the potential of these bulkhead PRBs, this is what we measured in these columns. If we extrapolate this to a bulkhead of 1 meter thickness, so our columns were 1 meter thick, this is what we are talking about right now, and we think about a 1 meter piece of bulkhead PRB, 2 meters deep, which is exactly what the test cell is. These systems can remove between 3.8 to 5.9 pounds of nitrogen per year. To put this into context, a typical household releases about 3 pounds of nitrogen per year. So basically, like, 4 or 5 meters of bulkhead PRB will remove the entire nitrogen that comes from one house. We did another extrapolation looking at the Peconics, how much bulkhead is already there, is in place, which is about 24 kilometers. So if over the next decades or so, all this bulkhead will be replaced just without building new areas with bulkhead, nitrogen input to the Peconics could be reduced by 22%. So I think this is a significant improvement. In terms of costs, it's also very interesting. There are studies that estimate how much money do we have to put in to reduce nitrogen supply to the groundwater. And for example, in Florida, they estimated that by improving on-site wastewater treatment systems, the cost to remove a pound of nitrogen is somewhere between $29 and $52. Just assuming now this low number here, 29, and extrapolating our findings to a 100 feet bulkhead PRB, which has an installation cost of about $100,000, this system will remove more than 100 pounds of nitrogen per year. And given that we expect a lifetime of those systems of 30 years, and now the important number you cannot see, the cost benefit of the PRB in place behind the bulkhead is $100,000. So it's pretty much the same that it costs to build it. So you get the bulkhead renovation for free. You take into account what this system would do over 30 years in terms of nitrogen removal. So based on these data so far, I would say in the future this should be the default choice when we need to build or rebuild existing bulkheads. And that well, so the 1 meter thickness is I think appropriate for most situations, but work like beforehand to figure out the nitrogen loading at the site, the hydraulic head at this site, or how fast does water flow through will determine the thickness of the layer. But in principle, we end up with very high nitrogen removal in these. And the seawater intrusion to some extent is actually beneficial because it provides an electron acceptor that will result in a byproduct which is much less problematic than in a system that would not have sulfide in it. Future work, as Ron already mentioned there, right now we are looking for replacement of existing bulkhead where we can install sampling ports to further monitor these systems, because even though these data are very promising, this is based on a relatively small test cell. But future, if we can confirm these results, I think this is a very promising technology for the future. So not to advocate for bulkheads, but making something good of something bad and getting in principle over the years the bulkhead for free. I think it's very promising.
Have you tried using charcoal instead of the wood chips, taking a step further?
I didn't try it. I don't know, Ron, do you have experience? But in principle, yes, these are exactly the questions that would be interesting to look at. Could we even like improve those systems by using alternative matrix materials? So what kinds of woods are the best ones? Or the okay. So you have to come up?
Or have to go up to speak?
But the question was if we could use alternative
Charcoal
materials,
instead of wood
charcoal
chips.
or wood chip instead of wood chips. That's definitely a possibility. Wood chips, the nice thing is that they are readily available. We can use really like the cheapest materials. That's obviously a good thing. And wood chips are out there produced by each village and each city.
Light them on fire and put them out. You have charcoal.
I think one thing to keep in mind is charcoal is also it filters things. The sites on it get used up, and other things might bond to it. So it has an affinity for certain other contaminants or other issues. So the wood chips are really just providing a source of carbon. That's all that they really have to do. It's not really a filtration. It's creating an environment suitable for this denitrification. So we are, to answer your question, we are looking at other types of carbon sources, even liquid forms, injections. We have other projects going on to try to expand this. I just want to reemphasize that, you know, what we're doing really is trying to find remedies that are kind of like triage. We're not trying to suggest that all the other great efforts inland are occurring at the same time. What we're looking at is what can we do near shore that can provide relief, why alternate septics, changes in whatever zoning or sewering or whatever might be occurring inland that will take time. What can we do now? And one encouraging thing is things like this can bring a remedy to an impaired water body in the short term, while these other efforts are very important, are continuing. And so that was really the emphasis that we took on. What can we do now to try to bridge that gap?
I do have one question about the PRBs. The town has acquired some properties over in the Flanders area after the Sandy storm, and have you thought about working with the town and installing any of these PRBs in back of those bulkheads? Because the area in Flanders Bay is an impaired water body, as we know. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was certified for shellfishing, but as of right now, it's uncertified. And it's preliminarily most of the septic that's gone through the bulkheads into the canals and into the area up there. So I think that would be a really good place to start.
Yeah, no, we're open to that, and we encourage anything you bring our way. You know, we have data, we have a pilot that was successful. We're taking the next step in Hampton Bays. The CPF funding was approved for that project in Hampton Bays. We're going to learn a lot with our collaborators in Stony Brook and internally in Cornell. And what we're hoping to do from that is apply it to the next area. So we're looking for other areas that we can you know, possibly design. Each one's a little unique. They have different drives, they have different sources, so we need to look at that, but we'd be more than happy to you know, address or to look at any site that you would want to bring our way. So feel free to.
Do you need, or do the applicant need a review by the DEC as far as a special permit, or is it something that they're looking just to streamline and put in, you know, with very little strings attached?
Yeah, we haven't. We had a meeting with DEC. We have a permit for the Hampton Bays work. And our meeting was that the ones that's behind the bulkhead, not in a wetland, they're okay with it. So we haven't run into an issue with DEC. They're funding a lot of this PRB work for us now, so we're in contact with them all the time. They're one of the funders of the Iron Point Park Flanders. So we've had that discussion, and we're probably going to have more discussions as this moves forward, because you know, this is in its infancy, and we hope that very soon we'll have the kind of results. You know, we want to do it in a stepwise way and make sure, as Neil said, there are some negatives that can occur. So you want to make sure you get this right. I think we have the right group to do that, and to evaluate this and to do it in a stepwise way that we can get the information to the towns to proceed further.
Yeah, because this board probably approves well over 100, maybe almost 200 replacement bulkheads throughout the town of Southampton. So personally, being a fisherman and a bayman and knowing some of the poor water qualities, basically the bulkhead is the last line of defense. So I would really, you know, encourage you, to have conversations with some of the local consultants to see if any of their clients would be willing to do some of these bulkhead PRBs throughout the town. Because I'm sure our board would be more than willing to work with you on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the goal. I was glad the Ham Hill Association, which I'm a member of, we were able to. We had the right formula, and CPF board was great, and you guys were great. And Scott, we've worked. You know, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring this all together through the town, with the town. and the community, and that the CPF funding is there to assist in the bulkhead, not to pay for all the replacement. The way it works for us is it's gonna pay for all the additional work. Community is still gonna pay for its bulkhead, the association. So we're not asking for that money, we made that very clear. So we don't want, this isn't a way to get a bulkhead, but there's a lot of effort and work that has to go into putting this in. And the CPF money is, I think, is appropriate for that, because it is a community benefit to remove that nitrogen that's coming from multiple areas and sources.
We're working on a site in western Shinnecock. It's like a coordination between the trustees and the town. It's property that we own part and they own part. We're working on redoing all the bulkheading there. I'm wondering if we shouldn't take a look at that site.
Yeah,
Western Shinnecock is pretty impaired.
Yeah.
The other thing I was wondering is that there's a lot of areas where there are bulkheads, but obviously you've got the tie rods and all the dead men and the lay logs in the way. Now, how far back do you set these things behind the bulkhead? In other words, is there a way to come into some of these sites where you have heavy loading into the bay where perhaps it makes sense to put these things in?
Yeah, the design that we're doing is gonna have multiple returns. So, and the bulkheading and the PRB material is right up at the edge where the water is. And it's not above the water line, it's not the part that's exposed. The holes that are put in below the bay bottom sediment. So you don't even see that. In the structural evaluation we've done so far, by using a little larger size bulkheading and a little deeper, won't structurally interfere, and with the multiple returns, you get more strength. And so you're not compromising it by having these holes that are venting it, and they're underground anyhow, so they don't see the wave action or anything else. So we've gotten through a lot of that, and that's part of the design work that will go into this. But we're looking actually at retrofitting some. We have another project in East Hampton. It might be a way to retrofit a good bulkhead of good quality. So there's a lot going on, and I think we have a good team and go forward with this, and we're learning as we're going too. It's, Niall said, there's not a lot of literature out there. There's a lot about PRBs, but in this marine variable tidal-driven bottom, we've even looked at some that are in the bottom, and those test cells are performing very well. So there's a lot going on with this. We'll keep you informed, but feel free to come to us with any site you want us to look at or evaluate or partner with, or a community group, another association, or somebody. We're more than happy to provide that service to you guys.
How would this work, since we take 10 foot from the bulkhead back because the ties and whatever, that's our jurisdiction?
Right.
And what do you put on top of this, and how far in the ground is it? We have a 10-foot buffer, no mow, no grass growing, no fertilization.
Right. Yeah, it's a wood chip and aggregate mix, so it's mixed. It has pea gravel and such in it. And it'll said it lasts 30 years. It's very slow. There might be some subsidence over the time, and you might have to put some more sand there, but you get that washout anyhow. There's some maintenance going on with bulkheads here, regardless of what what's there, and it's in that within that 10-foot area. And we're not seeing a lot of that. And I think partially because it's a 40 or 60% mix of wood chips that last 30 years, and gravel, so you're not making sinkholes or anything. Any subsidence that you might get would be so gradual that it can be dealt with. And we took that into consideration, when we did this, that it could be but you're always replenishing. Our bulkhead gets washed out all the time. We're bringing in sand. You have that maintenance to begin with, so it's not going to go away. I don't think it's excessive because the PRBs.
Could you put this gravel mix with the wood chips upland, like say if you have a freshwater stream coming down or rainwater coming down to catch it, let that stuff go through it?
You can put it, the problem we were having was looking at putting it in the surface water,
Yeah.
I'm talking above the, yeah.
Like below, like, like.
If you put it in the bottom,
Yeah, like
that'll
couple,
be,
no, like a couple feet below the ground,
Yeah.
where like the stream comes, you know that the water comes down, like in my neighborhood, I know the water comes down to the ground, like a foot below the ground, the surface. If I bury it down there, it can clean the water as it goes through my yard, to the next yard.
yeah, you're right on it. Yeah, East Hampton, we're doing some of that to try to see if we can intercept it in a unbulkheaded area near shore.
Yeah.
With these little, basically little cells that are peppered in the bottom or near shore or intertidal. And they're performing very well. We've been monitoring some of those for Kim Shore and the Natural Resource Group for 3 years now, and that's encouraging. So we're looking to continue to expand that. It's a little trickier with DEC, so we're working on that.
Yeah, you know, on that subject of tricky with the DEC, we had a project that we worked on that we all thought was a good project specifically for this community, Flanders, and it kind of got moved around. But I think that the conditions still exist where it could be a good project. Do you think there's a possibility for resurrection of that? Because the board was, in favor of working with everybody on that. I mean, do you think in the future that that's could come back around, or?
I think so. I think, like I said, DEC is supporting a lot of this, and the regulators, and we're proving that it's not harmful. The lab, what's being collected in a very scientific way is showing that there aren't these negative impacts. Designing it right, and the big thing for me is you really got to evaluate what's there and understand it. It's not going to be one size fits all. It's going to be, there's some nuance to that, and that's the other part. That doesn't always get funded as well, to be honest with you. People don't give you money to build it, or to monitor it, and to put the monitoring up front. To learn what you need to learn to design it's a little hard.
I'm just wondering, based on the amount of work that we did on that other project, now that things are getting ironed out with the 20% on the Community Preservation Fund, and they are funding a different project in Hampton Bays, if there isn't some merit for this community for us to, get working on trying to resurrect that design, and then also making the approach to the committee that makes decisions for the Community Preservation Fund for 2019 or 20, to try and resurrect that project, because I think it was good for this community.
I would think so. I mean, it's a feeling.
Maybe we'll talk about that and
sure.
work out the
Whatever we can
logistics.
help you with from the science end or outreach end.
Because we were pretty far along. I was, I
Yeah.
thought for sure that was going to work out.
Yeah, but I think that's still out there and it's
Okay.
still viable.
Let's have further communication on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Discussion number 3, LOI passages, Byron Young, New York State DEC retired member of the Citizens Advisory Committee for Peconic Estuary Program and advocate for river herring restoration on Long Island.
Thank you very much. What I'm going to do, come on, come back. I'm going to put that down. It doesn't want to stay. Okay. Okay. You saw the fish. What I would like to talk about this evening is the alewife project in the Peconic River, and specifically what's going on at Woodhull Dam on the Little River that leads up into Wildwood Lake. We started this project in 1995 with a small Peconic Estuary demonstration grant. In 1995, there was very limited fish passage over Woodhull Dam, maybe on a storm tide or an orange tide, and water would push over the top of the dam, and fish could get above that. Most of the spawning activities for alewives, which is a river herring related to the shad, and the other herrings that are local. They are anadromous. They live in salt water. They come back to freshwater streams to spawn. And what we've learned over the last few years is that the river herring in the Peconic River come back to the Peconic River. So there's pretty strong site fidelity for these fish. So their spawning in the 1990s was in the tidewater just below Grangeville Park and probably downstream a ways until they hit some perceptible salt, maybe down as far as the aquarium, maybe not that far. So it was a small run, but it was quite active. In the 1990s, in the early spring, when it got nice and warm, you'd see people dipping alewives at the North Spillway in Grangeville Park. So we thought it would be a good idea to catch some of those fish, move them over the top of the spillway, and see if we could enhance that spawning run. We did that for a couple of years under this demonstration grant. Then Bob Conklin, who was a middle school science teacher in Riverhead, he and his students picked up the project and ran it for several years while we looked at the development of a fish ladder for there. Through a local community effort run by Mr. Conklin, Tim Griffin at Griffin Hardware, and a few others, we were able to purchase an Alaska Steep Pass, which Miller Environmental in Calverton put into the dam at no cost to anyone. He liked the project. It was a simple solution to a simple problem. The fish started to use that, and very quickly we found that these fish were turning up Little River and looking to go back to Wildwood Lake, which is probably their historic spawning spot. They also used the main stem of the river. We would see them at the gauging station at Upper Mills, and at high enough flows they can make it over the gauging station. At low flows they can't, they're stopped there. So since, okay, from, I guess the fish ladder went in 97 to 2000. Okay, get myself back. Yeah, from 2000, the fish ladder went in 2000. It was put in every spring in around the 1st of March by Miller Environmental, taken out by the 1st of May under our permit with DEC. We knew it passed fish because we saw fish every year at Woodhull and at Upper Mills. Meanwhile, we were working with the Peconic Estuary Program, working on our own, working with the town of Riverhead and some of the town of Southampton. We were looking at other means to get permanent fish passage at Grangeville Park. And I think most of you are familiar with that park. The fish ladder that is in there is a nature-like fish ladder. It's called a rock ramp. The fish can use it at their will. There's no maintenance to speak of. And it's a very nice thing. That was completed in the year 2010. The cost, Elizabeth, the cost of that fish ladder was what?
I think $1 million.
$1 million for the fish ladder component of it. They had to rebuild the dam on top of that. That was much, much more, because the dam had not been rebuilt in a century and a half or something like that. So the concrete works were crumbling. It's now a dam that's up to state standards, so it should last well past our times. So once the fish ladder went in, I started thinking about what's our next step. The Peconic Estuary folks were thinking about the next steps. And I started looking at the fish that were congregating at Upper Mills, I mean at Woodhull. And that's not a very good picture. Well, I don't know if you can see the fish in that. It's pretty light. The fish that congregate at the base of Woodhull Dam, they start congregating there as early as the end of February, generally in March, and by April, they're in relatively large numbers. The pool below the dam, I've estimated as high as 10,000 fish in the pool at any one time, and they come and go. The fish will come in, they'll spawn, they'll leave. We just had some new information that they may come and go several times. So the estimates of my numbers may be a little bit off, you'll see a little bit later. But you get down there at the right time in April, late April, at the top of Woodhull Dam and look down into the pool downstream, and you should be able to see large numbers of fish concentrated there. Now, the thing that these fish are protected. There's no harvest. The town of Southampton, the Southampton Trustees. When did you close your fishery? Mid-90s, late 90s?
Yeah.
Okay, they were ahead of the curve because of some excessive harvests. The two largest spawning streams for alewives on Long Island occur in the town of Southampton. Alewife Creek on Noyak Road, North Sea Road, and the Peconic River. The Alewife Creek one has been documented at 80,000 spawning adults. That was documented with video camera counts. Some poor graduate student, before they had software that counted the fish for them, had to count each fish as it went by the camera. So the camera was operating 24/7 for 3 months, and they did the counts for those 3 months of video. We've attempted the camera count at Grangable. Unfortunately, the camera fouls very quickly, so we don't get good information. We're looking at something this year using a Smith Root electronic counter. Hopefully we can get it in and get a better estimate of the numbers of fish that go through there. Now, let's see, this is, all right, I'm not sure if this is gonna work. Let me go back up to the computer for a second. No, I don't think it's gonna work. I had a video of some fish in the pool. I'm gonna give it to the folks at the trustees, and it should be able to get up on your website. Will it work? Oh, there it is, okay. Oh, thank you. So that's what it looks like in the pool at the height of the run. And these fish are all about 10 to 12 inches long, and range in age from probably 3 to about 8. So at this point in time, the fish that are gonna come back into the Peconic estuary are staging probably somewhere off the Cape right now. By January, February, they'll move into Block Island Sound, and by February, they're moving into the bay. And then when the temperatures are right, they will start to filter into the streams. They're like water temperatures that are in the high 40s to mid to upper 50s. Once it gets into the 60-degree temperature range, they're starting to not like it so well. They lay their eggs in batches. The eggs they sink to the bottom, they're adhesive. At temperatures in the 50-degree range, they will hatch within a week, and then the larvae will hang around in the stream. They can move out into salt water within 2 to 3 weeks. So some of the ones in the Peconic, I think, move out relatively quickly. Or I think we would see more of the juveniles in the system. Let me see. Can you shut that video off for me? I don't think we need to see more. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Oop. All right. So as I said, I've been doing biological sampling at Woodhull because there was no biological data on alewives from Long Island. New York State has a large volume of alewife data from the Hudson River, which is our major spawning run. That spawning run is in the millions of fish. Alewives, blueback herring, American shad, but it's a much larger system. It's 153 miles of tidewater in Albany. In the Peconic, we have about 1.5 miles of spawning out area for alewives right now. We don't see the other fish. I have not seen blueback herring in there. American shad, all like the larger rivers. And striped bass come up to the, I've heard of striped bass going up through the fish ladder, a few, but they'll come up to the base of it certainly. So the biological sampling that I do is basically length, scale sample for age, and an estimate of count. I use my grandson and his cousin. They love it, little boys and fish. My only rule is don't fall in. It's not don't get wet, don't fall in. When we first started, we were using dip nets. At that point, the fish, the structure of the spillway below the dam allowed us to dip fish comfortably. Then as that changed over time, I started to employ a small cast net, which is very effective. We still dip a few fish. And we're careful with the cast net. I don't want to catch too many fish. I don't want to kill fish. And the grandson and the youngest granddaughter has now gotten into it. She helps. She loves to dip them out of the bucket so I can measure them. I'm taking fork length, total length, and as I said, scale samples. I've been doing that for now. This will be the 9th year coming up. We have some samples, some biological data samples from Alewife Creek. Very few. That's a little more difficult for me to get to and get set up. Getting there when the fish are running is always difficult. We have some fish from Massapequa Creek, some from the Carmens River, and some from Mill River in Rockville Center. But this is the largest group of fish. All right, this is cut off. My estimate, my eyeball estimate, looking in the pool and making an estimate of what I see or what I think is there, I come up with an estimate each year, a range of number of fish, and it ranges between 25,000 and probably 80,000 fish every year come back to the Peconic River, and that's been going on since 2010. There's some pulses. You can see the pulses when you look at the biological data, that you'll have some years where you have a lot of small fish, which are first-time spawners, and they will move through, and then you'll see they'll disappear, and you'll see another pulse of small fish coming. So and some of the other river herring runs in the Hudson, the same thing. There's a cycle to it, up and down. What we'd like to do is get these fish more access to the historic spawning runs throughout the Peconic River. So up into Wildwood Lake, across Woodhull Dam, up above Upper Mills, above the lake at the dam at Forge Pond. There's already a fish ladder at Edwards Avenue. That's waiting for when the fish do get there, which is, the way things are going, is going to be decades. Oop, wrong one. Here we go. This one I can skip over. The average size of the fish is about 10 to 12 inches. This is all metric. I apologize for that. I thought about, just before I came out, that I should have put it in English numbers, but I didn't. And the male-female ratio, it's dominated by males. It's usually 1.2 to 1.6 males to the female in the river, but that's typical of these spawning runs. There's more males. The females come in, when they're ready to deposit their eggs, a number of males will whirl around her and deposit. She deposits the eggs, they deposit the milk, and hopefully the eggs get fertilized. Each female will deposit between 80,000 and 250,000 eggs. Now the survival rate is pretty small on all of that. Some of them don't get fertilized, some of them don't hatch. And the American eels that are in the system, and the yellow perch, and some of these other things love alewife eggs. So they're always in there helping themselves. Not in great numbers, but they are. And again, this is cut off. This is the mean total length. And you can see it varies from year to year. The years will be on the bottom. To the right is 2010, to the left is 2010, to the right is 2017. Not much variation. I think the biggest female alewife I've seen there is 327 millimeters, which is about 12.5 to 13 inches. And this one doesn't, this is the male to female. You can't, the males are smaller generally. They mature earlier, so 2 to 3 years of age. Females are 3 to 5. Another picture, underwater picture. And with the increase of alewives in the system, we didn't think about this when we started working with the fish ladder at Grangeville Park. The benefits to other creatures in the area. When the ospreys show up here in the spring in Flanders, the alewives are in. The osprey and alewives seem to be in sync with each other. And you can get down to Woodhull if you want to watch ospreys catching fish. Sit on top of the dam quietly. You know, you can use your car as a blind. You can drive out there fairly safely. And they will sit in the tree and drop into the pool and catch an alewife and fly right over the top of your car. Then the great egrets come in, great blue herons come in, black-crowned night herons, the herring gulls, obviously. There's raccoons that come in there. I was talking to Mike Bonatini, who does some river otter work, and he's found some, not at the Woodhull Dam site, but in the Peconic River, he has found river otter latrines, spots where they have been feeding. So these consequences, though these benefits, are something we didn't think about, but it is helping the local bird population, the local animal population, not to mention the freshwater fish populations and the oceanic populations. Everybody likes a herring to eat. It's the potato chips of the sea. The other thing, the seal the picture was taken in the pool at Grangeville Park Dam. Now, I've caught a gizzard shad, not a river herring, but I'm sure that they're out in the mouth of the bay feeding on the river herring. And how many of you have seen the bald eagles here in Flanders? Yeah. So I'm not sure if they're taking herring. I have not seen them around the pool, but you have? Okay, good. I think they're nesting at Hubbard County Park.
I got them at the end of Sylvan Avenue.
Oh, you do? Okay. And then a nest.
Oh, not a nest,
Just see
no,
them
it's
flying by.
Yeah, okay. There's a nest somewhere around here in this area, along this part of the Peconic, which is exciting. I've seen the adults up as far as Edwards Avenue, and I think some folks have seen them up at Epcal. Now, whether those are from the Peconic or from the South Shore, I don't know. Oops, let me see now. Okay, the future actions, we're hoping to get a fish ladder built at Woodhull Dam. We've been working on that now for 7 years or longer. We have the designs done. We're still waiting for the permit from the DEC Dam Safety Unit. They've had lots of questions about, what's it going to do? Is the dam going to hold up to this activity? Hopefully we'll get that permit early in the calendar year. There'd be no action taken in the springtime when the fish are coming in to spawn. It would be something, if any action was to take place, it would take place as early as the fall of 2019. I won't hold my breath for that. It might be 2020. I hope at least then. We're doing, let's see, I can't read. Okay, that's the permits. We're hoping to get some better estimates of the count in the Peconic River. We all think, the folks that have been working on it, the Peconic Estuary folks, Cornell, Seatuck Environmental, we all think that this run could be several 100,000 fish and would be a major spawning run on the east end of Long Island. Right now, it's all protected. Relaxing those protections would have to take into consideration what's going on the coast, what all of the people that are involved would have to say about it. Certainly they come into the trustees' purview when they come up into fresh water. So that's a big unanswered question. There was never a large harvest, was there, Ed?
Not in my lifetime.
No, there was some fairly decent, big takes just about the time you were closing it at Inlet Creek. The couple of nights I was down there collecting fish to move, people were taking coolers full. But that's something we don't want to have happen. It might be that a limited fishery could take place. There was the fishery in Riverhead was what you might call a subsistence fishery. They come down and catch a 5-gallon bucket to take home and eat. After a couple of 5-gallon buckets of phony alewives, they decided they'd had enough.
Byron, the only time there was a sustainable or a very large harvest was when the duck farms were here, back in the early, like 1800s and 1900s.
Okay.
That was when the major amount of alewives were harvested.
Okay.
Other than that, it was just a local family getting a bucket. like
Yeah.
you said.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you can see this. This is the diagram of the proposed fish passage. Now, is this one? Oops. Oh, what did I do? Shut it off. Which one was the light? Okay, so this is County Road 51 up here, and so this is this grass area. This is walking along the trail out to the spillway, the current spillway, which is right here. The proposed fish ladder would come out of the pool. It would be a denial type ladder, which is a set of baffles inside of a concrete box. So it slows the water down so the fish can swim through the center of it. It would go under the roadway. There's a holding pool here, and they would enter into the pond above the dam here. The engineering would have it such that it's not going to affect the water levels, and it could be controlled. You could put baffle fields in. Hopefully we'll be able to put a video camera in the top of this fish ladder and get a count of the fish that are going up into Wildwood Lake or up into the Cranberry Bog Preserve. So we have some better, stronger estimate of that. And this area over here is a small wetland that has to be created because there was some damage to freshwater wetlands at the base of the fish ladder. It's kind of tough to read, and those, I think that's something that's available, isn't it, Elizabeth? We can make.
Yeah, I can make it available.
Make copies available?
Yeah.
All right, so that's the future for Woodhull. That's our nearest one. We're looking at Upper Mills, which involves Southampton, Suffolk County, Riverhead, and the alphabet soup of our power companies. All right, the problem with that one is that there are active power lines going through the dam, and there's an abandoned gas line going through the dam. So those all have to be taken into consideration before anything is done there. Plus, you've got the USGS gauging station just downstream. That is probably a relatively easy fix, either a step pool, something simple. We've been working with USGS to come up with some configuration that doesn't affect their centuries-long data stream. And then Forge Lake, which is Brookhaven Town, they have to rebuild the bridge that goes across the dam, and they've got a plan to put fish passage in beside the spillway, an Alaska steep pass with step pools. And with that, I think I'll stop. Anybody have any questions, or should I wait for questions until the end? Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, Byron. We have a fourth discussion tonight, living shorelines. Aaron Tichunian, coastal geologist, First Coastal Corporation.
Thank you, Mr. President Warner, and members of the board, members of the public. It's my pleasure to come after hearing such informative and deeply researched, well thought out projects. I'm really honored to be a speaker this evening. As President Warner said, I'm a coastal geologist. I'm from West Hampton Beach. I've been working on the east end of Long Island for some 35 years. We've done a number of these living shoreline projects. Things on automatic somehow. In the post-Sandy era, this is working with what we call nature-based solutions has become much more important and much more accepted in the regulatory scheme. This is just to see if I can figure out how to stop that from doing that. So that's really important, because no matter how good an idea you have, if you can't get a permit to do it, then you can't do it. And as we heard from our previous speaker, they're working very diligently on what is clearly an amazing project, but they're having to go through a lot of red tape, which is part of the system. But what's happened in the post-Sandy era, anyway, in the post-Sandy era, as I was saying, the regulatory agencies have taken a new look at living shorelines and decided this is a real good idea. So what is a living shoreline? What are the regulations? And how do we deal with them in this post-Sandy world? The definition of a living shoreline is right up here on the screen. I won't read the words, but essentially think about this. A living shoreline is what was here before we were. Okay? And so what we're trying to do is mimic nature in doing that. And again, I'm really thrilled to be part of the discussion this evening, because what we're doing here with Living Shorelines fits in so well to what's going on with Kim and the oysters and the permeable reactive barriers and the alewites, because it's all part of how we have learned to work with the system. We learned what the system is, and now we're implementing it one step at a time. So with the living shoreline, this is our definition, as I said, and it's not the elimination of rocks, it's the proper incorporation. It's the proper balance of things. And so if we, and what we talked about in living shorelines is what we call green and gray. So not everything is right for every situation. In some situations, it's so energetic, there's no choice but to put in some type of highly durable structure, whether it's rock or steel or timber. But in many situations, there are green solutions that can be applied. And even more situations, there's a combination of these gray and green that will really be the best application at any individual site. So working through that balance is really where the challenge is today. So when we look at these shorelines, there's the star. You know, what are these living shorelines? In a lot of cases, they incorporate rock structures as breakwaters to break the wave action, and rock in the back to protect the toe of the embankment. But in between that, creating this very healthy tidal marsh, which is a critical part of the entire ecosystem. The oysters depend on the wetlands depend on the oysters, the fish need the wetlands for nutrients. It's all part of a natural cycle. In cross-section, what we just looked at in that photo, you can see right here, it's got some type of a living breakwater. In many cases, the breakwaters can actually incorporate oysters in them. So you'll take a rock structure and then you'll seed that with oysters. So you really get a living breakwater offshore. And then you have a marsh in between, and then the upland over here protected. The object here is to find this balance on each section of shoreline, which means you have to truly understand the forces that are being applied on each section of shoreline. And it doesn't mean get rid of what you have. And this is a great situation where they actually retrofitted a concrete seawall with revetment in front of it, and incorporated a tidal wetland and a small breakwater in front of that. So here you have the best of all worlds. You have a very, very healthy tidal wetland. Look how great that grass is. And you have a seawall behind it giving highly durable and highly predictable protection. So again, it's not the elimination of one, it's the proper combination. This is a much more natural setting. We find a lot of these settings along the bays in Southampton, including the Peconic Bays. And you can see that, you know, in this situation, again, we have some type of a wave tripping absorption. In this case, it's actually oyster reefs. You have a nice tidal wetland, and you have a sandy beach behind it. So this is a slightly different environment. The wave energy is a little bit lower. You don't need the tow protection on the land. The sandy beach itself provides that. But the wave intensity, the tidal surge, the wind are all different at each site. So you can't be in a situation where you say, well, I'm sorry, I cannot have any hard structures. Well, we're not talking about the difference between soft and hard. We're talking about the difference between green and gray. And we're talking about how we mix green and gray together to get the best situation at every site. So we can't have any situations where we're dealing with living shorelines where we say, I can't have this. That'd be like saying I can't have vegetation. Well, if vegetation will work, you can have it. Very, very simply, all you have to know about this slide is that the Army Corps of Engineers has developed a nationwide permit. That means if you meet the criteria in the permit, you send them an email and you say, here's my site plan, thanks, I'm using that permit. Really, really, really easy to use. Also, free. No cost. The DEC has come up with a little more complicated, nevertheless accessible guidance document. As you can see, it's very recent. This is just a year ago that this was adopted. And what they do, this is a 45-page document. It's available online. All you have to do is search for those words right up there. There's copies of my report that are on the back table. If you need anything from me, just send me an email and I'll shoot you the link and you can go look at it yourself. But the point here is they've come up with a guidance manual that says, do it this way and we'll give you a permit. Again, that's nice because you have predictability. I've been in front of this board before and have explained what I'm explaining to you, and I can tell you that my reaction from the trustees was extremely supportive, and I think that if somebody came to the trustee board with a well thought out plan that matched the guidance documents that the DEC and the Army Corps wanted, I would believe that this board would support it. You also have at a national level, you have the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, is developing a whole series of design parameters and samples and examples so that you can actually look at what others have done in the Chesapeake Bay, in South Carolina, where this, by the way, has been going on for decades. If you go to the Chesapeake Bay, there are literally thousands of these projects. If you go to the Carolinas and into Georgia, there are thousands of these projects. So in New York, we're a little bit behind, but we decided to catch up. Here's a couple of projects in Shinnecock Bay. There's one really, really cool project right here at the Shinnecock lands. This was a really neat federally funded project. And there's a couple of smaller projects here along Montauk Highway in Shinnecock Hills, and another one down here in East Quogue. And I'll just show you, very quickly what they look like. Sorry, this is a little dark, but this is the Coastal Habitat Restoration Project that the Shinnecocks put together. And they have reinforced this tidal creek, created a rock offshore sill right here, nourished this area with sand, and created a new dune wetland in the background. All those combinations we saw earlier on, this went on in Shinnecock Bay, and this project extends over a half a mile of shoreline. It's about 3 years old at this point and working extremely well. Here's a different type of project where the vegetation has been incorporated in. These fiber logs called core rolls have been put in, and then at the very toe there's some small rock structures to absorb the wave action that hits right at the toe of the bluff. And as all of us know who have walked on the bluff beaches after a storm, that's what happened. The waves attack the toe, the whole thing becomes over steepened, the bluff drops down. Once the bluff drops down, the game's over. So you can't, in this situation, you have to have some type of positive protection at the toe, because if you lose the toe, you lose the entire bluff. But that doesn't mean that you can't put in these core logs, which are a little greener, but they're still gray, and then all the way up into this really nice native vegetation, which is very green. So green and gray, not green or gray. These are two projects that are really mistakes. Okay, these are projects that are right on Montauk Highway in just after you cross over the canal headed east in Shinnecock Hills. But what you can see is by the presence of this nearshore breakwater has reduced the wave energy to the point that the beach behind it is much more stable than it is. It's more stable here than it is to either side. It's more stable here than it is here. So again, this is, although this was a failure in the sense of the breakwater, that used to be a shoreline revetment that was supposed to stop all of the erosion on the shoreline. It's more suited for this living shoreline configuration where you have a wave tripping device that's in the near shore. This is a project over in East Quogue, and this project is several years old. I want to thank Mr. Warner for recommending this to me. I walked it just today, as a matter of fact. And I hadn't been on the site in 25 years, so thanks for sending me over there. But here we see all of the elements we saw in the examples. We have right here, we have a breakwater along the shoreline that's knocking the wave energy down enough that the tidal marsh can grow behind there. Because previously the shoreline was just eroding back at 1 or 2 or 3 feet a year. Now the shoreline is stable by the rock breakwater. The tidal marsh, you can see, is well developed in here. You have little pieces of sandy beach that walk along here, which is nice. We like walking on sandy beaches. And then right in here at the base of the slope, you can see we have the rock protection. So this is very similar to the example slides I showed you before. The point I want to make is we're doing this right here and it works. Here's a different little project over on Mauritius Bay. This one's in the village of West Hampton Dunes. And in this particular project, we actually buried the rock inside the dune and then built a dune on top and then vegetated the whole dune. And if you would please just click that, it should, oh, it's going to start on its own. This is a time lapse. We find these time lapse to be really useful on our construction work. And this is a time-lapse video of that project. So they're working very quickly, moving along. The sun does get in the way, but you can't help it. And you can see that after the trench is dug, the rocks are placed, the sand is put over top, and they work their way down the beach. But then again, like most contractors, they walk off the job for about a week and a half. So this one rolls through for a little while, and then it'll pick up, and it'll show you all the beach grass planting that gets done. There we go. The sun goes down, and we have it very nice, and then it comes back up the next day. So just to save a little time, what happens is then the crews will come in, and this will all be hand graded and then planted with beach grass. So when you walk down the beach, you see a dune. This is on the bay. This is on Mauritius Bay. And yeah, there's a beach grass. They just got it in. I turned my head and they put it in. So let's just advance. Now here's a project that's right in your neighborhood. This is at the end of Evergreen Avenue, right here in Flanders. And this is a post-Sandy project. So what happened was there was actually a concrete retaining wall here that had failed during Sandy. So here's Evergreen Avenue, and there's a bulkhead right here at the end that the town built, and this is the property. And what happened was they started to rebuild the retaining wall, and they got stopped by the town of Southampton, and we had to go through a whole series of hearings. But the result of the hearing was that we built a really cool project. And thank you, if you would hit that again. Oh, there it goes. This is another, oops, let's go back. I think it'll roll on its own. I hope. Yeah, here it goes. So this is another project where, again, we incorporated the stone in the center of the project. The object is we put the rock in the center, we cover it over with sandy material, we plant all that with native vegetation, and if the storm comes and it doesn't erode away the material, then we're great. It worked perfectly. If the storm exceeds our design and causes the vegetation and the sand to be removed, then you have the rock back there to stop everything, and you can just come back in and recover it and replant it, and you're right back to a native shoreline. So I'm sorry that one didn't work as well. So how do you implement this stuff? We're homeowners, we've got a problem. How are we going to go about doing this? Sounds very complicated. Very complicated. You told me that the federal permit's free, but the state permit's got this whole list, and I know I got to come to the board. Well, the fact of the matter is that these permits, although some of the technical jargon is pretty complicated, this is being more and more accepted by the state, and totally accepted by the Fed, and locally, I think, gaining more favor. But if you understand and implement these technical guidances, you will be able to design, develop, and implement a project. And one of the keys to doing this is working together as groups. In the same way that Kim was talking to you about oyster gardens where they have 80 lines of oysters. Now, how many oysters on a line, Kim? There's thousands, right? Did he take off? Okay. But the point is, one person working has one line of oysters. 80 people working together have 80 lines of oysters. Their effort is much, much more impactful. The same thing on working on shorelines. Working together as groups, even 2, 3, or 4 property owners together, you can achieve a much more substantial project that provides a lot more protection. And then my favorite is, I say, if you're doing all that work, you should ask the trustees to waive your application fee. I know I'm just going to go over big with the board. So I just, I figured, you're doing all that hard work, you want to get something. And anyway, I just want to, again, I want to thank the trustees for inviting me this evening. I was really enthralled with all of the cool stuff that's going on in our neighborhood that we just don't get to hear enough of, because the only thing we hear in the headlines are the bad news. So there's some good news out there, and I'm very thrilled and pleased that I was invited to speak tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to have any questions to any of the people that put up forth the discussions tonight? Could you please come up to the podium, state your name, and you can ask the questions.
Good evening, board members. Ken Densiewski. I'm right here in Riverside. I was actually born in the Cranberry Bog. That's where I lived. Mr. Young, I've met you before. There's one problem. In the Cranberry Bog, you have 2 spill pipes. Are the fish going to get to Wildwood if they can't get through those spill pipes?
Thank you for that question. Excuse me. I have been passing fish over the top of Woodhull Dam for a number of years, and I'm aware that they make it to Wildwood Lake through those pipes. I've looked at them. They can go through some pretty tight areas. It's amazing how these fish will wiggle through some little tiny spots.
But the pipes are like 3 feet above.
They'll go through
A hole that
a
big.
4-inch hole. The electronic counting system that we want to put in is either going to use a 4-inch or a 6-inch pipe so that the electronic counter will pick up the fish going through it. These fish have one thing on their mind when they come in the spring, and that's to get to their spawning grounds and to spawn. And it's amazing to watch them at Woodhull. They will attempt to jump up over that little bit of waterfall. A few years ago, some locals had put in a wooden chute that went from the pool up into the concrete spillway, and at the right water levels, those fish would swim up across that wooden chute and would swim halfway up the ramp, the concrete ramp, and hold there. Now, there was no way they were going to make it over the dam because it was another 4 feet straight up, but they could get halfway up that dam in the water flowing, and then they'd fall back and spawn in the pool below. Yes, there's some room for improvement in the Cranberry Bog area to improve those 2 areas, but there's enough flow for those fish to get through. Okay?
To make it through that.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Byron, can you ask, Trustee Pella just posed a question. There's a little bit of history between the DEC and the trustees in Wildwood Lake. I think we're all familiar, or most of us are familiar with it. And I've reached out to a couple of the attorneys at the DEC, and can we continue this conversation so that when we get the passageway and everything gets restored, that we have an understanding that we still have our jurisdiction on that lake up there, and we don't have to go through any of these, court proceedings again?
I would hope so. I am so far out of that process.
Yeah.
But let me put it to you this way. I would be willing to support that position as a citizen. It's a tough nut. I know that the regional fish manager had tried to draft a memo that would allow that to happen, and the attorneys in Albany rejected it. So I think there's some possibilities that could take place. It's to put it bluntly, it's silly. It's one of those things where you guys have protected the fish better than the state has, in recent history.
We have a conversation with Chuck Guthrie.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
chart was the.
Yes.
Yes,
Chuck,
yes.
I thought we were,
Yeah.
at the board level, I thought we were working to
Yeah.
try and find a
And he
resolution.
had done that. He is recently retired. His replacement is Heidi O'Riordan. But I think, that's something that we can discuss with the Peconic Estuary folks. It's a discussion that probably is going to have to take place. I don't see the department, well, okay, I'm talking from the marine side of it, because that's.
DEC is going to challenge Southampton's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
We would love to have that in writing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's just the tough part from the lawyer's standpoint. to
Yeah.
get it in writing, but I really don't think they're going to.
But I have my history of 12 years being on the board, and I have a previous history of my father, almost 30 years being on the board, and I know what the town went through, the trustees went through, and the DEC, and there was some bad blood there. So
Yes.
I'm hoping
And-
that we could put that aside and look at the bigger picture.
Why don't we
And the
invite-
folks that are here that are, well, Elizabeth is current DEC, Steve and I are both retired. We were on the marine side of it. The freshwater fisheries folks, those are the ones you were dealing with. I've got the same history that you have with that. I was not directly involved in those early litigations, and they go back 30 years plus. And they were ugly and nasty as far as I could, and it was the DEC not being a good neighbor, in my opinion of that, in one respect. When they put the access site in and had that fishing tournament and trashed the place. So hopefully this can be worked out. It would be nice to have a piece of paper. I know you guys would like to have the piece of paper that says, no, they're not going to come back and try to manage
That
the
would
fish
make
and wall.
sense. I
Well,
mean, you
Yeah.
know.
The other thing with the alewives is that they're going to come into the lake, the adults are going to come in, they're going to spawn, and they're going to get out. The young, some will stay in the lake, some have overwintered in the lake. There was a person fishing through the ice several years ago when we had ice on the lake. He caught a nice trout in the lake and had an alewife juvenile in his stomach. So it's feeding the trout that are in the lake, it's feeding the bass that are in the lake. Generally, those young are going to want to move out into the bay and into the ocean. So it's something that can be worked with. There's a whole new cast of characters, too.
But
So
you know what, it's interesting, because we are right now at the cusp where we have to work out with the attorneys at the DEC in order for us to be successful with the shellfish seeding project that the state wants to engage in on our bay bottom. We're trying to not have any unintended consequences, so maybe, if we can work through that, and like Dr. Gobler, he was addressing us yesterday, and, there are some time constraints that have to occur for that to be successful. So we really have to bring this to a head. I think if we can resolve the one issue, we should be able to resolve the second issue. And I think based on where we're at today, we really have to work together in order to be successful for all of this.
No, I
So
agree.
I think we're at a good point in time to fix this.
And that's, yes, I agree with that. Working together on this issue, both the state and the towns and the counties, well, plural counties, are looking out for the alewives. So this is a positive step. And the management of the fish, it's a broader picture, a bigger picture than that. If Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission were to say tomorrow that, you can't touch an alewife ever, well, the National Marine Fisheries Service wanted to make it an endangered species, which puts it in a whole nother category.
I think part of the problem is I think we're one of the last, trustee boards that exist, in the world. And I think it's a very misunderstood situation,
Yes.
but it's a serious responsibility.
Well,
And,
as I said, if you need some input from me in helping to smooth this situation out, let me know.
That'd be great.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
Byron.
You're welcome.
I think basically what they were talking about in common terms is that if the LYs go up there into Wildwood, and with the state, with the dam and everything, it opens Wildwood Lake open to anyone who wants to go fishing in the state. Right now, the only way anyone can go fishing outside of Southampton town, they have to be with the town residents. If you want to keep it for the freeholders, that's what we're trying to do. Keep it just for the town people to use, not outside of Southampton town. That's what, and same thing with the clams. If the state comes in and plants clams in our bay bottom, we don't want people from Albany to come out down here to go clamming. Okay, it's for the freeholders, it's for the town people, and that's what we're talking about in common terms.
All right, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? If not, let's open the meeting to the public portion. If anybody has any concerns in the local Flanders area that the trustees deal with, we're willing to hear your concerns and try to get some information back to you.
Ken Denseski again. Who's responsible for the Wildwood Lake area? It has become very overgrown where the stream empties from the lake. It goes under behind the old gas station. It became so overgrown this past fall and last fall that I literally had to clean the leaves out because it was no longer running water. It was just a muck pile, and the water had no place to go. Unfortunately, the town, that portion is owned by Suffolk County. The town in the past had mowed the grass, kept the weeds down. Now, because of a couple of people in the neighborhood wanted everything left alone, they're not trimming the trees anymore. It has become so overgrown that you can't even see the stream anymore. So it's backing up, especially with the leaves. Right now, I think it's okay. It's running. I try to keep an eye on it. But it's something you might want to consider before it overgrows again.
That's my area, and marine maintenance, we can send them down there now that we know about that. Thank you so much for letting us know.
Okay, because they had met me a couple of years ago down there, and they helped me out.
The stream bed's our property. We take care of the stream beds.
Yeah, this stuff's literally growing in the stream bed
Yeah,
now.
and then we can send maintenance down there and clean it up.
Okay,
Just have to
thank
let
you.
us know. If you see it, give us a call.
You know me.
I know. How about that snow fence?
We got the snow fence out.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions for the board? Can you please come up to the podium and state your name?
My name is Lorraine Pacelio from Bayview Pine Civic Association. I think we talked a few times with a few of you. And I know, Mr. Horowitz, last time we spoke, we had brought up a problem with, or we didn't know what's going on with the rock at Water's Edge Beach. Have you been able to
Right,
find
I
anything else?
Transferred that off to the constables to take a look at and just make sure whatever activities that are occurring, that there are permits. I'm waiting for a report back from them.
Okay.
I notified them the day after I spoke to you.
Okay, if you could let us know when
Sure,
you
as soon
find
as
out.
I get a report back
we
from
can tell
them.
the residents, yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And Martha, I had wanted to know if you spoke to the trustees about our meeting that we had in September. I had emailed and called you a couple times, but I didn't hear back as far as some type of resolution about the beach, the Bayview Pines Beach, and the deeded beach rights there, and whether or not we could have something in writing, because we have a lot of kickback from other communities. And also, we had asked whether or not, I don't know if you guys do it or not, but we asked for some type of assistance in getting parking permits for the town of Southampton only. I think the board does that, is that right? You guys
Correct.
don't do anything with that?
So parking permits, the road that goes down to the beach is in the town highway system. And there are currently no parking restrictions, so any restrictions that would be placed on a public highway would have to go through the town board.
Okay.
As opposed to this board, which has different jurisdiction.
Okay.
And then with respect to your earlier question about your deeded beach rights, as I've explained in the past, there's a history here of how your subdivision was created in the 1950s by the original subdivider, Mrs. Grace Romano.
Yes.
And so I think one thing that I would like to do, just because for layman's terms, when we talk about a deeded beach right, it is a right that it was granted to all the lot owners of Bayview Pines to use a beach bathing area in common with others for bathing and boating purposes. And so what it means is it's essentially a permission, it's an easement in that respect, that any lot owner in Bayview Pines can use this beach area, and whoever owns that particular parcel that comprises the beach area can never exclude someone who owns in Bayview Pines.
Right.
And this particular parcel that we're talking about is now owned by the trustees. So, I mean, if you would like to make your request to the trustees here at this point in the public portion, you can do so. The trustees cannot extinguish this beach right. It runs with the land.
Well, you know, what I had discussed with you was that we got a lot of pushback from other area groups and community organizations. You know, I mean, I had people yell and scream at me, we have no deeded beach rights. And I would just like to have a memo or something that says that we do have deeded beach rights. It's hard to pull out, 50 years of deeds and stuff, but if there's some kind of acknowledgement or some type of, you had said that you would talk about getting some type of resolution or something in writing so that we do not have that conflict going forward. Did you decide not to be able to do that, or?
Well, that is up to the board to decide what they want to do. But again, the rights that run in everyone's deeds, those cannot be extinguished.
I understand that, but you had said that you would speak to the board about that, and they decided not to do that, or?
No. I'm not exactly sure. The board isn't the original grantor of those beach rights, and they can't modify them, they can't extinguish them, etc. They run with your property and
And it
your
goes with
land.
our property, too.
That's correct.
Yes, your
As a property
property is
owner.
encumbered. So say, had it not been acquired by the trustees, but previously when it was owned by private individuals, they could never have excluded anyone who owns a piece of property in Bayview Pines from using that beach.
Right.
But the beach is now owned by the trustees. And so that right still exists, but you have an owner who's,
I would just like to have some type of acknowledgement in writing from the new owners, the trustees, that says that these deeded beach rights continue, that they are in existence, because like I said, we have a lot of people saying they don't exist. That's all. It's just a piece of paper. It's not like, it's just an acknowledgement of what exactly you're saying.
Yeah.
We own it, right?
Yeah, but it's a public beach, It's
not a public beach.
If we own it,
Yes, it is a public beach. It's a public beach with an easement over it for deeded beach rights for the community. So anybody in the town of Southampton that drives down Long Neck Boulevard, parks here, they can go sit on that beach and utilize it.
Well, I don't think it's a public beach, though, because I don't think it's on the, well, I understand you own it.
And anything below the high tide mark is definitely trustees' property, and that is definitely public.
Okay.
So above the high tide mark, it's owned by the trustees, but I think it's encumbered by this covenant that allows the people or the residents of your community to use it. But it also allows everybody else in the town to use it.
I think that was more important when it was not held by the trustees, because we don't exclude anybody from using it.
Well, at that, when it was owned by other people, it was considered a private beach
Right.
because private citizens owned it. And,
But you had an easement for your community to use.
They couldn't exclude you.
But the main reason we got those properties was so that we could have a deposition site for the two canals to be, the interfaces to be dredged. That's the important part for us.
But
So-
those canals have not been dredged, as far as I know. The one that's in the back of, by
No,
Fantasy
the
Drive.
interface, basically from the mouth of it seaward, the county did both of the, in the last couple of years, have done both of those dredgings, and the sand was put on the beach. And then everything inside, the community would pay for, because it's privately owned bottom.
I didn't follow what you just said, but
If you draw a line at the mouth of each one of those creeks, everything that is basically south of that goes inland is owned by, half of the creek is, on each side is owned by a property owner. They're privately owned, man-made, dug canals. Everything from that point, at the mouth of it, out into the bay, has been maintained by the trustees' permit with the help of the county doing the dredging.
okay. Well, I noticed that there's a lot of sand in front of the beach, your beach, that goes way out. It's always been like that, so I don't know if you can dredge that area or not, but we could sure use a lot more sand on that beach. It's disappearing very rapidly, and the water's coming right into our community. So if there's any other dredging or any other sand that we can put on that beach, we need dunes there to protect our whole community. I know that you did some, but,
Yeah, I believe either Scott or Eric Schultz was working with the community to get permits to dredge the two canals. and to use the property at Fantasy for a deposition area
Yes.
to dry the material out, and if it was the ability to smooth it out if it wasn't too silty and mucky, and then we can create a bigger dune. But we would have to see the consistency of the material.
I think that feeds into the conversation that we had the other night about the coastal resiliency for this community. And I think that, we had the town engineer involved in that conversation, and perhaps there'll be some more things that can be done. And I think, this community needs to work on that. That's going to be a much bigger and heavier lift. Obviously, we're going to have a part in that when you're talking about things that are in our jurisdiction. But that's going to have to be a much bigger project to really be successful. You got roads that are low, that get flooded on a regular basis. Stormwater is a problem. These nor'easters and storms. This is a problem for this community that's going to require everybody to get around the table and try and figure out what's the best way to handle it.
Right.
Will we have some participation there? Sure, with the things that are in our jurisdiction, we're going to work with you and work with everybody else on trying to find some solutions that make sense. But it's going to take a much bigger group to really be successful with what it is that you folks need to do. I mean, I've got all kinds of information. I attend meetings and work with all these people. So this is a big problem for your community, and I think that there's a direction to move in the getting this coastal resiliency, but it's a much bigger plan than we can handle by ourselves.
If we need to do anything, if my community can do anything to help push it along, we've been talking to people for a long time about it since Mr. Schultz sat on your board. And, the beach is still eroding, and the corner of the beach where there was some rock there is really underwater now. I don't know who takes care of that, the DEC or you guys, but it's along the beach where you guys protect, so I don't know what I can do except to bring it to your attention. And as far as the rock that's on Water's Edge Beach, the president of the Water's Edge doesn't know anything about it. They own that beach outright, fee simple, so I don't know why they would not know anything about that, and I would appreciate if, just keep us in the loop, that's all.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
You could reach out to us, at any time. You don't have to wait for these forums or meetings.
Okay.
You could reach us.
We
and
have, yeah.
We have the constables that, they check on things and they report back, and we're out in the field all the time. But, sea level rise and dealing with coastal resiliency, it's a bigger problem. It's not as easily solved. And, I think the town engineer said it very well. You stick your finger in a hole in the dike and the water's coming out on the other side. So you really have to take a wide look at this and figure out.
Maybe there should be a task force or some kind of, special board that meets about these, correcting these problems. I don't know,
It spans across many jurisdictions. You may read in the paper or see, this board's been working on a MECOX management plan, which is, in a different part of the town.
Mm-hmm.
But, the effects of what we own and is in our jurisdiction, the manner by which it is managed, affects things that are by far outside of our jurisdiction. And to place that responsibility on a 5-member historical board with limited resources, completely irresponsible. It's a similar situation here. Everybody has to get around the table.
Right.
In good faith, work as hard as they can to try and find solutions, and it's not easy. But we're doing that.
Thank you. When does the Army Corps of Engineer get involved in shore protection and things like that? Because I know they're involved in Long Beach and other areas. When do they get involved? I mean, what is the threshold, do you know?
That's really a question to ask, our local congressman. I mean, obviously, they need to be getting involved in these things. It's got sources and resources have to come from, every available agency that there is if we're going to be successful with this. I mean, let's be realistic.
Right.
So, those are the types of questions where when we have discussions with, Lee Zeldin's office in this case, what is it that we can do? But yourselves as a community, feel free to stay in contact with all of the elected officials at every single level, because we all have to work together. So
Right.
I appreciate you bringing this to our attention here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you.
Okay, my third and final subject, the management of the beach behind the bowling alley, the Wildwood Lake Beach, which you're in a partnership in with the town. Is there any plans for I know there was a phase 2 to the project where they wanted to build basketball courts and tennis courts. The lagoon is totally closed in now. There is no more running water. That lagoon is totally cut off. It's a pond now. The problem is, everyone who's using that beach in the summertime is non-residents. You invited the non-residents in, the board, with the agreement they have with the bowling alley, and it's creating a lot of problems with the fish and wildlife because they're taking everything. They're even eating the freshwater clams, pure bacteria. I just want to know if you guys are aware of this, if there's anything we can do, because it seems like I've been butting my head up against the wall. As far as non-residents, he's filling that parking lot up every day, and most of them don't even have New York license plates. And I just wanted to know if the board was aware of that. Because they are fishing, they're taking clams. I don't know if we need more of a Bay Constable presence there.
Probably an enforcement issue.
To me, I don't know why it's not residents only. That seems to be the answer. Because it's the non-residents that are ruining it.
It's not our parking area, so that would be something you'd have to talk to.
Actually, it is. The 2 rows next to the lake are yours,
Trustee.
Southampton town.
Yeah, but
On the other side of the island is all the bowling alley.
we have the pond and the high water mark, everything seaward of that is ours. The lagoon is ours. Everything upwards of that is the town board.
Town board.
And that would be the conversation, where you should bring that conversation.
Okay, that's.
Because originally, when I first became a trustee in 2006, 2007, we want to have an agreement with the Parks Department for $1 a year. We were going to lease them the park, that area, the beach for bathing, and they were going to provide, lifeguards and, keeping it clean and maintenance, and that never happened. So that would be probably going back to the town board, talking to their liaison to the Parks Department to see if they would be willing to actually have a park there where they had lifeguards and a managed area. Because there were picnic tables that were there that were never put together. There were.
They're still there,
fi-
up on the basketball
There were
court.
fires there that people just let burn, and it was all out of our jurisdiction. But we tried working at the time with, I believe, Linda Cabot and Chris Nuzzi to get it resolved. We were working towards a resolution, but the town, the parks person that was in charge at the time didn't want anything to do with it, so it just got left alone.
We can revisit that, because you have a new new park leader there who now, the other one's not retired, and we should revisit that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to have a
Something could be done.
conversation.
It's just a shame because,
Yeah.
we used to go there as kids on our bikes and there was no worries. It's not like that anymore.
You had
At
the
all.
town put bathroom facilities there, parking, and made it somewhat of a night. And it encouraged people to come there, but then they had no backup as far as cleaning it and
Well, that's what happened is
maintenance of
once
it.
one person from out of town found out about it, it was actually on social media. They're coming here from Brentwood, Islip, from all areas up the west end of the island.
That
so-
would be, like I said, that's a conversation for the town board.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
The subject of enforcement, obviously, we have our Bay Constables, they're spread very thin. We're working on with the chief of police and the arrangements that the Bay Constables are trapped, with the responsibilities between the trustee board and the police department. Obviously, public safety, is a priority in this town and should be in everybody's town, but also protection of our resources. So we're working on the statistics to show the amount of calls and the amount of demand that there are for these people. And at the very least, I think we need 2 part-time Bay Constables to kind of fill in at various different times. You talk about social media. We have these problems in other areas of the town where, the blue claw crabs are on and social media has everybody running around, and then we got to head that off the pass.
2 buses full.
I understand, and we take protecting the resources of the people of this town very seriously, and we're doing what we can to try and get, those protections for everybody. That's important to us all. So thanks for bringing it up, and understand we are trying to do what we can to remedy that.
Very good, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Ferrantino. I'm actually the president of the Long Neck Royal Canal Association. So to answer the young lady's question, we have been judged twice. We've working with these guys very closely to try and put more sand on that beach. You know, it's hitched on the county and whether the county dredger can get there. There's a lot of variables that go on, but these guys have been great about working it through from that perspective. We're still looking at the list this year. We'll hopefully get dredged. We've got permits at our own place. It's private permits. That's what Ed was talking
Yes.
about. We own our own permits also. So if we can't get dredged and we need our community dredge, we'll dredge out. Okay, we are working with them in terms of the back, which is what Ed was just talking about. So Eric Schultz and I started that a long time ago with a bunch of our guys that are here. My question to really Ed's you, we've worked with you guys a lot. Okay, so from my perspective, worked with you guys all the time. You guys are great. The problem is it's coordination across the town. So who can coordinate activities? We've talked to Jay individually. We've talked to Alex individually. We've talked to you guys individually about the low water, about lots of different things. 2 years ago in February, I had a meeting at my house with 6 people. We took notes. We were going to meet. Nothing's ever getting done. And the reason is, it isn't because you guys aren't trying. You are. It's not. Listen, I talk to Scott all the time. It's not you're not trying. You just don't have authority, right? So when you get down to the road, and I need a problem at the bottom of the road, Alex owns that.
Correct.
When I go to Jay says, well, Alex won't do anything. So why not? You're the president of the town. Well, he has his own agenda. Okay, well, I can't get it done. I go to you guys are great. Yeah, we should do this. We go down to the DEC. DEC says to you, got to talk to you guys. So we're all this community is doing is everybody's doing this. Right. So and I agree with you, we need to get a community of people together, right? Maybe it's, Franca, maybe it's Water's Edge, maybe it's Bayview Pines, maybe it's me, but we need representation from you guys and the town to have a community meeting that says we're going to work on these projects to get them done. Because we can't get them done if I come to you. It's not getting done.
When I first was on the trustees, and I remember going to the men's club over there for one of your CAC meetings.
Yeah.
I was there, Eric was there,
Yep.
Scott Strow was leaving the
Yep.
board, but he was there.
Yep.
And Billy Masterson was there.
Yep.
I think it was Skip was there, or Linda was there. And we, as a community,
We were great.
you'd bring up a question, and
Yep.
whoever's jurisdiction it was, we'd get up, explain what we could do, and we'd bring it back to our respective boards, and it would get done.
But that has stopped.
I don't know what's happened in the last 5 years.
I'm agreeing with you. And I'm just saying, I listened to the young lady talking. So my only question is, I'll work through Scott, I'll work through you, I don't care, but we need to coordinate. And I mean Jay's office, right? I'm talking about Alex's office. I'm talking about whoever, the DEC's office. It's not, my issue is you guys have been great. The problem is you don't have any authority when it goes to the town. I got the end of I can show you pictures that in daytime now the water comes up the street. I can't get Alex to talk to me.
I think that a couple things, that we can't really answer
So,
to that.
can't answer it.
But here's the reality, though. Obviously, we're talking about this, there's a coastal resilience situation that has to be dealt with. And it's like, I want to use this whole MECOX management plan that we've been working on for how many years, right? In the last couple of years, it's been all the jurisdictions having to get together, find a date where it intersects, where all the jurisdictions must come together, whether you're in that room or you're beamed in by conference call.
Right.
And then you had a focused goal that you needed to get to the point where you could get out to the public and hold public hearings, which we're having now. So, that, I think, method for our town is going to be a template for a lot of things. It certainly could be a template for other waterways and how we get together to fix them, but it could also be a template for what it is that you're talking about right here. So we could, a group of us could get together and say, listen, these are the issues from the community leaders. Let's get who's ever going to be on this panel. We're going to set some meeting dates. We're going to work on it. And then at some point in time when we have some solutions, we're going out to the public. And we were successul in this, and we're having very good public hearings now. I'll work with you on that.
I'm willing to work with you. We work very closely. And Ed, you guys have been great. It's not. I just want somebody to go coordinate within the town, because our issue is we've got issues here that don't involve the water. It involves the water at some level because water runs off. Runoff is in the water, so we get you involved. But other issues have nothing to do with you guys. So I'm looking for some coordination. That's all I'm looking for. Because That's
We
the
can
biggest
do what
issue
we
I
can
got.
do, but I mean, other elected officials are gonna have to be accountable
Correct.
for
Right.
their responsibilities that they ran for. We will do everything we can to try and help.
I'll
this
work with
community.
you guys, and if you can get the meetings coordinated, I'll certainly show up.
I can give you an example. Oakhurst and Road over in Shinnecock Hills. Some of the people in the area wanted a parking by permit only.
Right.
It's a town road to a town bulkhead, a highway bulkhead to a trustee beach and stuff. So what I did, I met with some of the people in the area. Then I brought in Chris Nuzzi at the time, he was the council person. We sat down, we listened to their concerns. They wanted access, they wanted parking, they wanted striping, parking by permit, doggy pickup bags, and a bunch of stuff, signage and everything. So I met with Chris and the people in the area. We sat down, heard their concerns. He brought it to the town board. They put on a resolution, they had a hearing, put on a resolution because everybody agreed, and they made it parking by permit. So that's, as far as Long Neck Boulevard, that would be the way I would go. I would either, if you want me to go with you, the liaison or the town board member who's has your community, I would sit with her or him, whoever it is, with a bunch of community members, come up with a plan.
I'll give you a suggestion, a quarterly meeting that we have 4 people there, you know, our group will come, it'll be this day, and we have somebody from this organization, somebody from the town showing up, and we'll have a published agenda that says, this is what we're gonna cover, so if it's got to do with roads, we need Alex. If it doesn't have to do with roads, we don't need him there, so why do we ask him?
That's the very reason for this meeting.
Right, okay.
We decided amongst our board
Right.
members that the town is a big town, that
Right.
we should have quarterly meetings during the
Right.
year and go to different parts of the town to hear your concerns, not hear it through the
Right.
rumor mill, hear it firsthand, so that we could come up with plans that, whatever's on our purview, that we could work on and resolving.
Which is great for you guys, but it doesn't solve the community's other issues, and that's my concern, right?
All we can do is-
Parking, you can't solve my parking problem, you can't solve my road end problem.
But we are a conduit to the other people.
We
But
can
we've
help.
done this for years, 2 years, 3 years, I've been going down this path, I beg to differ, I've been doing this for 3 years. I did it when Eric was involved, and I would, he'd come to my house, we'd sit down, and then 2 years would go by, you know.
I think you're gonna have to take, unless the town board is coming to the.
No, we need to have an active plan, is what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
I'm saying I'll work with you, Scott,
Yeah.
we'll sit down, we'll try to figure it out. I mean, you gotta take step 1 before you get to step 2, so.
We had a
I'm willing to
meeting,
do that.
we had a meeting at your house, I guess it was last winter.
2 years.
2 years ago, right? We came over there. Time flies when you're having all this fun. You know?
We can't get through the water.
You know, but, yeah, I got you. But, yeah, so, and I've been down there, obviously, after that for various other meetings. But I remember with a group of folks being over there, and then everyone has their part of
Everybody had
what.
the,
Right, everyone has their part of what they have to do. And we rolled back in here last week, I guess it was Friday, right? And we had a discussion about a
and
lot
part
of
of it's our fault, we go away too, it's not about you, we gotta stay on top, but you hear from my buddy every day, so,
Yeah.
my buddy's there, he's calling every day, so, but my point is, we try to stay in touch, right? And we're not trying to, I could call you, but we try to use one conduit, right? So that's the whole.
Well, I think that, again, I'll go back to this group that we had to try and, accomplish something successful on something that's important to everybody in the town, and that's Mecox Bay. And I've discussed this publicly as well. Whether or not you live in that area, that being managed the right way from an environmental and a financial perspective benefits everybody in this town. All right? So, if we can kind of, adopt the same protocols that we did with that very, very focused group, we had a goal that we had to accomplish, and we stayed on that, and now we're at public hearing phase. If we could do something like that and perhaps be successful, and you and I will have a conversation after the meeting's over, and we'll figure out how we're going to do this.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all. But again, thank you for you guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to address the board? If not, I'd like to close the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.